With this, I'd like to introduce you all to our keynote speaker. Join me in welcoming Reverend Fletcher Harper, who is GreenFaith Executive Director. He is a pioneer of the global religious environmental movement. He helped spearhead the faith-based fossil fuel divestment movement, organizes faith turnouts at major climate mobilizations, and is a co-founder of SHINE, an international campaign that supports women and community-led renewable energy access initiatives in Africa and India. He is the author of GreenFaith, Mobilizing God's People to Protect the Earth. Please remember, you could use the same link that Helena pasted in the chat to add any more questions you would like to share. Please do include your name so we can get back to you. If time permits, we will address these questions during our session today. Alternatively, we will try to get back to you later on. Let's all welcome Reverend Fletcher. Good morning.
Great. Greetings. It's great to be with everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Good.
Welcome.
My apologies. I'm unexpectedly in an airport, and so I just had to move around at the last second to get away from someone who was speaking very loudly right next to me. So at any rate, we've all had that experience. So it's great to be with you, and Lawrence and the Consulus team asked me to speak with you all for just a couple of minutes about the growth and development of GreenFaith's work, organizing religious groups around climate and environmental issues. I've been doing this for 20 years now, and what I would say is that there have been two interrelated but distinct aspects to the way in which we've approached making change. One, when we started this work 20 years ago, it may be difficult to remember a time like this, but people of different religions, by and large, simply could not understand that there was a link between their religion and the protection of the environment. Religion had been so much about the well-being and the welfare of human people, or about sacred rituals of various kinds, that there was, it was a bit like a Buddhist koan. You would say to people, religion and the environment, and they would stare at you as if the two things were a great mystery in terms of any potential connection between them. And so the first stage of our change-making process was a very energetic commitment to raising awareness in a way that our various communities could hear. So we spent a number of years doing countless speaking engagements, connecting the link between the impact of environmental degradation, the impact of climate change, and religious teachings and values. And fairly consistently, we saw that people were able to make the connections, but at first it was as if they were hearing something for the first time, and like any process of change, they had to hear it repeatedly before it really began to sink in. We found that using stories was far more effective than simply using data. We found that the original language about the nature of the problem that we were facing, which was the language of science, for our audience was a piece of how we needed to communicate about the importance of change, but was not at all sufficient on its own terms. And we found that in addition to the transmission of information, that communicating with conviction was enormously important when you're dealing with people who are reckoning with the need to make change or the invitation to make some kind of change. Information alone is insufficient in terms of convincing them that they're going to make an effort to do that. They need to see that the people who are advocating for it are walking the talk themselves and are demonstrating a level of conviction that is credible and sustained and real. So that was a first stage. And I would say that that first stage was what I would refer to as winning the battle of the ideas. And we knew once we saw higher level religious leaders in various organizational structures starting to speak about this issue, we knew that we were winning the battle of ideas, because there was modest opposition to this new focus on the environment and climate change, largely from religious fundamentalist groups and highly conservative religious groups. Opposition which was predictable on many levels, but it was for the mainstream of the population not a convincing counter argument. So we saw that we were winning the battle of ideas, and the next stage that emerged was the need then to move people from holding a comfortable but a passive opinion into actually taking public action. The kind of work that we do, we certainly believe that it is important for individuals to change their own consumption habits, to eat less meat, to use renewable energy, to reduce their transportation footprint. We believe that all of those individual changes are important. We also believe very firmly that the only way the planet will be saved and protected is if there is large-scale systemic change at the level of government policy, the behavior of financial institutions, and the behavior of the corporate sector, which is the sector that dictates the use of resources across the global economy. And it's a harder thing. It's one thing to get people to hold an opinion about something. It's an entirely different thing to get them to be willing to take a step such as to argue that their own religious institution should get its own investments out of the fossil fuel sector, or that large numbers of its members should take part in peaceful public protests, because all of the social science research shows that if you want to create large-scale systemic change at the political economic level, that you simply have to be in the business of organizing peaceful public protest and direct action. It's been proven beyond any reasonable doubt by social scientists that this is the way that large-scale social change takes place. And that's not an easy thing to sell for a lot of religious people who go to the temple or the dojo or the mosque or the synagogue or the church because they've had a rough week or they've got real challenges in their own life, and they just need some support to make it through the day themselves and to support their families. So with that, what we found is working with youth matters a lot. Working with youth matters because they care deeply about these issues. They view them as existential for their own future. I remember and identify with that. I'm 59 years old. I was very involved in the anti-nuclear movement in the 1980s, and that absolutely felt existential at that point in time, because it was, and it still is. So working with youth was a way to start to show adults in these congregations that this was something that they needed to pay attention to. And then finding ways to craft public ways that people could be people of faith in public. We didn't ask people to leave their faith at the door when they took part in these public actions. We encouraged them to showcase their religious and spiritual identity in culturally appropriate ways, proudly and clearly, saying that it's because I'm Buddhist that I'm here. It's because I'm Christian that I'm here. It's because I'm Muslim that I'm here. So that they were bringing their full selves into this work, and so that this work that we were asking them to do or inviting them to do represented an opportunity for personal growth and fulfillment for themselves, because people just by definition almost don't get involved with us unless their religious or spiritual belief or practice matters to them. And so what we're doing is we're offering them a chance to grow and develop and to build new skills in that regard. And we find that that's important. So I think these are the the two sort of eras of change that we've seen, the sort of winning the battle of the ideas. It's sort of, to use a Christian religious framework, it's an initial conversion, but then there's the conversion from belief into action. The second is much harder, and there is no shortcut. It takes continued conviction, passion, commitment, compassion, patience. It requires that you do 5 times more listening than talking so that you can ask people how they feel about taking public action, that kind of way. Most people are not born activists. Most people actually think that activism is either frightening or weird or objectionable. And so when you're asking them to do it, when you've got people so that they see the urgency of the problem, but they feel that the step they're being invited to take is one that they're uncomfortable with, it just takes a while to walk people through that process. Peer-to-peer support matters greatly. All of these things about creating change are not news to any of you. These are standard methods and practices that different organizations and companies and networks have used for centuries. But they work if they're applied with discipline and with consistency over time. I think the final thing that I'll say about how to create change is it is important to have a positive vision for the future, without question. And you have to paint that picture over and over and over again for people. But one element of creating change that I don't see a lot of reference to in much of the literature about the topic is that I actually think that it is important to recognize and to express dissatisfaction and even anger at the status quo. I think that until people are truly fed up with the way that things are, they very simply won't go through the process and the hassle and the effort of changing something in their own lives. It's just too inconvenient and life is just too busy. So dealing, perhaps it's because I'm a pastor by training, but dealing on this emotional level where one says there is a beautiful, positive future that we need to have, that our children deserve, and that the human family and the planet desperately need. And there is a present status quo that's utterly unacceptable and that is wrong and that needs to change. And being able to marshal both of those types of energy, the energy of a positive vision and the energy that comes with a profound, deep human moral dissatisfaction with the status quo. Both of those are absolutely necessary. And in our experience, if people think that they can change without dealing on an emotional level with those feelings, they're just wrong, because change is hard and takes time, and people need that level of emotional engagement in order to do it. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sorry about all the background noise from the airport that I've subjected all of you to. I hope the music hasn't been too awful, and I'll go on mute, but thank you for the privilege of speaking, and it's good to be with you all.